Who is the greatest con artist in history? Forget all those played by DiCaprio. Don't think about Anna Delvey. Forget Charles Ponzi, and even Bernie Madoff. The biggest swindler the world has ever seen is this man. His name is Jho Low. Today, he is one of the most wanted men on the planet. With his scam, he stole $4.5 billion. And unlike the swindlers mentioned before, he has never been caught. Jho Low was born in Penang, Malaysia, in 1981. At the age of 17, his family sent him to study at Harrow, one of London's most prestigious schools. Even though he came from a wealthy family, at Harrow Jho had to deal with people who were far richer than him, the children of real billionaires. From the very beginning, Low wanted to be admired by his classmates. He wanted to impress them, to feel part of their elite circle. So he invited them to spend their holidays in Malaysia. He organized private parties, pretended to belong to the royal family of Brunei, and began to carefully build connections. Among the first people he met was a student from the London School of Economics, Riza Aziz, the son of powerful Malaysian politician Najib Razak. Remember this name. At first, Low pretended to be a billionaire, just for fun. But by doing so, he collected more and more contacts, and not a single person questioned his lies. After Harrow, Jho Low moved to the United States to attend the Wharton School of Business in Philadelphia, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. Even here, Low refused to seem like the poorest student in the group, so he continued fabricating stories. To appear richer, he rented luxury cars to drive to campus and told everyone he was a Malaysian prince. Not only that, he saved money to rent entire clubs and private venues, where he hosted extravagant parties, inviting friends and acquaintances to convince them he was incredibly wealthy. Low loved being treated like royalty, surrounded by people hoping to get favors from him. And so, the game continued. But between one party and another, Low realized he could do far more than just have fun. He was gaining the trust of powerful people, and no one suspected a thing. After graduating in 2005, Jho Low began cashing in on the network he had built over the years. During his university holidays, he had met members of the royal family of Kuwait and the royal family of Jordan. He had spoken with young emirs and sheikhs, earning their trust and friendship. In 2007, he used his connections to open an investment fund. From the little official information available, it seems he created this fund together with a Malaysian prince, a Kuwaiti sheikh, and his old friend from Abu Dhabi, Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who today is the Deputy Prime Minister and Vice President of the United Arab Emirates. So what was Low's role? He managed the fund's money and arranged meetings between powerful figures. But he knew that if he truly wanted to rise, he had to ally with someone capable of controlling the destiny of an entire nation. And the key to that ambition was an old acquaintance, Riza Aziz, the son of Malaysian politician Najib Razak, whom Low had met years earlier at school. That politician was Najib Razak, at the time Malaysia's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense. Razak was a powerful figure in Malaysian politics, active since the 1980s, and the son of a former Prime Minister. So, In 2007, Riza Aziz introduced Jho Low to his godfather, Najib Razak. The two connected immediately. Razak believed Low was a talented businessman, or at least someone who knew how to move among powerful people and manage large amounts of money. His financial ties to Middle Eastern sheikhs seemed to confirm it. Low, on the other hand, realized Razak could become his golden opportunity. At this point, Jho Low decided to execute his plan. Thanks to his connections in the Middle East, he began studying sovereign wealth funds. But what exactly is a sovereign fund? A sovereign fund is simply a state-owned investment fund that operates on a global scale. Through such a fund, a country can invest its foreign currency reserves, export surpluses, or revenue from natural resources. These funds typically invest in stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity, and sometimes hedge funds, though usually they prefer long-term, lower-risk investments. A sovereign fund allows a nation to finance its economic development projects and welfare programs using investment profits. They are especially common in countries rich in natural resources like oil, particularly in the Persian Gulf, where oil money is reinvested to diversify the national economy beyond crude extraction. Sovereign funds are managed by boards of directors appointed by governments, and because they are not strongly regulated internationally, transparency isn't always guaranteed. After all, the funds are controlled by states. And this is exactly where Jho Low found his opportunity. In 2009, his old friend Najib Razak was elected Prime Minister of Malaysia. Low seized the moment and made a proposal that would change both of their lives and the future of an entire country. Malaysia is an important exporter of oil and gas, with the state playing a major role in the companies that manage extraction. So the conditions to create a national sovereign wealth fund were perfect. On paper, such a fund could help the country develop, allowing the government to invest state resources more strategically. The stated goal of the fund was to promote Malaysia's economic growth by attracting foreign capital and financing large national development projects. And so, Jho Low convinced Najib Razak. In 2009, they established Malaysia's sovereign fund, 1MDB, 1 Malaysia Development Berhad. Since there was no real oversight during the creation process, the fund was decided among friends behind closed doors, and no one inside the Malaysian government objected. On paper, 1MDB looked like a visionary idea, but what no one knew was that both Low and Najib intended to use the fund as their personal bank, hiding their actions thanks to Najib's political power and maintaining credibility through Low's international influence. In the eyes of the Malaysian public, Jho Low was seen as a brilliant businessman. So 1MDB launched with an initial capital of $1 billion, and like every sovereign fund, it was placed under the control of the Malaysian executive, meaning Najib Razak and his closest allies, who in turn would appoint the board of directors. And in all of this, Jho Low did not take any official role. Officially, he was only an informal advisor, someone who understood money and international connections. In reality, he had become the secret face of the operation, trusted both in Malaysia and abroad. It was Low himself who found the first major partner for 1MDB, the Saudi oil company, PetroSaudi. And how did a Saudi oil company get involved? Once again, through Jho Low's network of contacts. He personally knew PetroSaudi's two founders, Tarek Obaid and Prince Turki bin Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. Years later, they too would be suspected of collaborating in Low's criminal scheme. Let's go back to August 2009. A crucial meeting took place aboard a luxury yacht. Present were Najib Razak, members of his family, Jho Low, and the founders of PetroSaudi. The meeting happened off the coast of Monaco. Jho Low acted as mediator, and the group reached an agreement, formalized 1 month later. One MDB and PetroSaudi created a joint venture worth $2.5 billion. According to the agreement, PetroSaudi contributed $1.5 billion in oil and gas assets for Malaysia's development. One MDB, on the other hand, was supposed to invest $1 billion of Malaysian public funds. But there was a problem. Of that $1 billion, only $300 million actually arrived in the joint venture's bank account. The remaining $700 million were wired somewhere else, to a Swiss bank account at RBS Coutts in Zurich. Officially, that account belonged to a mysterious company registered in the Seychelles, Good Star Limited. On paper, Good Star was controlled by PetroSaudi. But that was only on paper. In reality, Good Star was controlled by Jho Low himself. He held the ownership documents, which meant one thing. Those $700 million had been stolen by Low and diverted into his private account. You might think he could have stopped there. $700 million is enough to disappear and live like a king forever. But for Jho Low, this was only the beginning. He wanted more. Much more. Those $700 million were just the first chapter of one of the greatest financial crimes in history. To keep the operation running, Low needed Najib Razak's protection. As Prime Minister of Malaysia and official overseer of one MDB, Najib could cover everything. One way to do that was to fill the board of directors with allies and accomplices. Meanwhile, Jho Low secretly managed the whole operation, moving money out of the joint venture and finding financial experts to launder and distribute funds among his partners. Between 2010 and 2011, one MDB transferred another $830 million to the joint venture. Of that, another $300 million disappeared into Good Star Ltd, straight into Jho Low's control. With all this stolen money, Najib Razak could finance political events and even his election campaigns, securing power to keep the scam alive. The machine had started, and now nothing seemed able to stop it. Forget about developing Malaysia. The real question is, how do you move money from Jho Low's Good Star account without getting caught? In the beginning, the fraudulent scheme designed by Jho Low was based on 3 main steps. Step 1. Jho Low created a network of bank accounts for himself, Najib, and PetroSaudi in Switzerland, Singapore, and the British Virgin Islands, territories known back then for strict banking secrecy. He then connected these accounts to a series of shell companies registered in tax havens like the Seychelles. These companies were deliberately given names resembling legitimate corporations, just like Good Star, which appeared to be owned by PetroSaudi only on paper. Another example was Blackstone Asia Real Estate Partners and BlackRock Commodities, fake names imitating real global brands. The goal was obvious: to avoid triggering red flags by making everything look trustworthy and professional, while also dragging real companies completely uninvolved into the shadows of suspicion. Step 2. Layering, the heart of money laundering. Low recruited a network of corrupt bankers, bribing them with cash and luxury gifts. He ordered them to transfer funds through dozens of accounts across different countries, often converting currencies along the way. This made tracing the original source of the money extremely difficult in the event of an investigation, especially one requiring international cooperation. Step 3. Integration, or making the stolen money look legitimate. Low needed a way to justify the millions he and his associates would receive. So he disguised the money as investments from offshore companies into legitimate businesses linked to his accomplices. In 2010, he founded Winton Group, also known as Winton Capital, in Hong Kong, a so-called consulting company that existed solely to manage his stolen fortune. Through Winton Capital, funds from the 1MDB scam appeared to be clean business investments or corporate payments from offshore companies. On paper, everything looked legitimate. To strengthen this facade, Winton Capital was linked to a charity, the Jinwell Foundation. Millions stolen from 1MDB were donated to charity under Low's name. These donations polished his public image, helping him pose as a philanthropist and visionary businessman in Malaysia and abroad. And what did he do with all the money and fame? He spent it at a level the world had rarely seen. He bought luxury cars, private jets, diamonds, and rare art, and even a $250 million super yacht called Equanimity. But he didn't spend just for himself. He used money to buy influence. He threw legendary parties, paying celebrities just to show up. He surrounded himself with actors, top models, and pop stars. In 2011 alone, he gave Kim Kardashian a $325,000 Ferrari, partied with Jamie Foxx, Leonardo DiCaprio, Alicia Keys, and Emily Ratajkowski, and became particularly close friends with Paris Hilton, who helped him gain access to the Hollywood elite. But Jho Low wasn't satisfied. He wanted more money, more power, more legitimacy. So in 2011, he acquired, together with Sony, a 15% stake in EMI, then the world's largest music company. And then, driven by greed and a desire for prestige, he moved into the film industry. In 2012, he invested over $100 million into a Hollywood production company. And who was behind this company? Riza Aziz, Najib Razak's stepson, and Jho Low's old schoolmate. The circle was closing. With the stolen funds, Jho Low and Riza Aziz financed The Wolf of Wall Street, the 2013 film directed by Martin Scorsese about the rise and fall of Jordan Belfort. Everything suddenly made sense. And if you look closely at the end credits, Jho Low is even mentioned among the special thanks. I want to thank Joey, Riza, and Joe. Thank you for being not only collaborators, but for taking a real risk on this film. Jho Low had become so confident that he openly financed a movie about corruption and greed using stolen money. Thanks to billions siphoned from 1MDB, he could truly spend like a billionaire. He had power, but he also had a problem. He wanted more. By the end of 2012, Low understood that to strengthen his reputation, he needed to gain credibility, not just among celebrities, but inside the global financial system. 1MDB had to be perceived as a legitimate and trustworthy sovereign fund, able to attract massive foreign investments from hedge funds and major banks. Using his network, Low approached Tim Leissner, a powerful banker who led the Southeast Asia division of Goldman Sachs, one of the most influential banks on the planet. Low invited Leissner to a private meeting, also attended by Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Low's old partner from Abu Dhabi. By now, Sheikh Mansour controlled Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, making him one of the most powerful financiers in the Middle East. Leissner decided to ignore the inconsistencies in one MDB's accounting. The three men reached a historic deal. Between 2012 and 2013, one MDB issued $6.5 billion in bonds through Goldman Sachs. Goldman privately sold the bonds to institutional investors, while Abu Dhabi's sovereign fund acted as guarantor, giving the operation enormous credibility. Investors were told the money would be used to build power plants in Malaysia. But in reality, things took a very different direction. The money raised by one MDB was wired to dozens of accounts controlled by Jho Low and his associates in Switzerland and Singapore. Not part of the money, all of it. And that was not all. A large portion of the funds was sent to client trust accounts held by US law firms. In practice, Low prepaid lawyers under attorney-client privilege, making the funds nearly untraceable. Years later, the United States Department of Justice would reveal that Low and his network laundered over $2.7 billion through the U.S. financial system. Classic money laundering techniques were also used, buying luxury real estate, companies, and high-value assets. Through this phase alone, Jho Low personally pocketed $1.4 billion. With that money, he kept throwing legendary parties and presenting himself as a global billionaire. By 2014, through Jinwell Capital, he even attempted to buy Reebok from Adidas. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs earned $600 million in commissions from the one MDB bond deals, technically legal earnings. Najib Razak, Malaysia's Prime Minister, received $10 million through an account tied to SRC International, a subsidiary of one MDB. With that money, Najib financed his 2013 election campaign and secured a second term in power. It is estimated that Najib ultimately profited by about $4.5 billion from the one MDB fund. And at this point, Jho Low seemed untouchable. He had protection from Goldman Sachs, backing from Abu Dhabi, and money spread across dozens of offshore companies. They had already made billions disappear, and nobody, anywhere, had noticed. It looked like the perfect crime, a scam that could continue forever. But then, something happened. By chasing international credibility, they forgot about something essential: public opinion at home. While one MDB gained prestige abroad thanks to deals with Goldman Sachs, inside Malaysia, people began to ask dangerous questions. It had been almost 5 years since the fund was created. So where were all the development projects Najib Razak had promised? Across the country, the truth had become an elephant in the room. Nothing concrete had been built. Nothing had changed. One MDB wasn't improving Malaysia's future. It wasn't doing anything at all. Suspicion grew. Finally, in 2015, the first investigative reports appeared. Malaysian journalists discovered that one MDB had only financed a single project, relocating a military base. No other initiative had been funded. Najib had never made one MDB's financial statements public, always avoiding questions by claiming that documents weren't available. Then, the castle of lies built by Jho Low finally cracked. And it took just one man to bring down the entire scheme, Xavier Justo. He had worked alongside Tarek Obaid, founder of Petro Saudi, from the very beginning. But after Obaid stopped paying him, Justo decided to take revenge. At the end of 2014, he leaked thousands of documents and over 200 to 27,000 emails to investigative journalist Claire Rewcastle-Brown, founder of the Malaysian news platform Sarawak Report. And then, the bomb exploded. In 2015, Sarawak Report exposed what would become known as one of the biggest financial scandals in world history. The investigation revealed the involvement of Prime Minister Najib Razak, but above all, it exposed the mastermind, Jho Low. It emerged that one MDB had accumulated over $11 billion in debt. The US, Singapore, Switzerland, and other governments launched investigations. Assets worth hundreds of millions were seized around the world. But unlike Najib and others, Jho Low had prepared for this moment. He knew someday things could fall apart. So when authorities came for him, he was already gone, vanished without a trace. In the years that followed, more heads rolled. Tim Leissner was identified as the only Goldman Sachs executive responsible for the bank's involvement. Goldman eventually reached a settlement with Malaysia, agreeing to pay $3.9 billion. Petro Saudi, meanwhile, is still under investigation in Switzerland as of late 2023. Many of the names involved remain unknown. The 1MDB investigations are still ongoing and could take years to conclude. But the person who paid the highest price was Najib Razak. The scandal and the outrage of the Malaysian people cost him the 2018 elections. His downfall began. In 2020, he was finally convicted, sentenced to 12 years in prison for corruption, abuse of power, and fraud. And so, with Najib behind bars, one question remained. Where is Jho Low? Since 2015, he has never been found. There have been alleged sightings, but nothing confirmed. An international arrest warrant is active against him from Interpol, and he is wanted in the United States, Singapore, and Malaysia. Some believe he first fled to Hong Kong, then China. Malaysian authorities think he now lives in Macau, protected by powerful allies. Others even speculate he has undergone plastic surgery to change his face and stay hidden forever. And so, the story continues. Billions still missing, governments still searching, and the man behind the greatest financial heist in modern history still free. How can a nation prevent a scam of this magnitude from happening again? That is a question for another day.